Toji Fushiguro is easily one of the most interesting characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. With that being said, while having so little screen time, he would make some of the biggest impacts in the series that we've seen yet. Not only that, but there's also a lot of mystery when it comes to his character. You see, Toji would be one of the most prominent members of the Zenin clan. He would be one of the only members of the Zenin clan that has the ability of the heavenly restriction on his body. Whether or not he had a curse technique before this is something that's still unknown. And wondering what curse technique he would have had before is also a different story. We would come to know that Toji actually has a passion for the Jujutsu side of the world and their teachings. It's just that he would throw these things away in an attempt to live a life without pride for himself or other people. But this same pride that he was trying to reject was the pride that was driving him to work so hard in the first place. To be able to kill Jujutsu sorcerers with his body bound by the heavenly restriction technique. It's really sad when you think about it because he threw everything away so that he could have everything that he wanted in a form of validation. Now, what would Toji's life be like when he's throwing away all of his pride and pride for other people? Easily, you could say that he's the lowest of the low in terms of morality. Penny pinching and scraping up just enough money to get by in his daily life. Whether it's between gambling or maybe killing a few people that will come at a hefty price. Toji just does what he wants regardless, and I think that's why a lot of people who actually get into Jujutsu Kaisen can enjoy him as a character, even though he gets so little screen time as it is. Knowing Toji's profession, this really makes you wonder how exactly is he able to complete bounties, what are his abilities, and what can he do? But with the heavenly restriction on his body, he has insane superhuman strength and abilities. However, he has no cursed energy. With that being said, he would be in a position where he could use stealth to his advantage, with most opponents never even being able to sense him. Also, to freely walk in and out of domain expansions. So that gives you a pretty good idea as to why he's able to kill so many sorcerers. But with the tools of trade, he would use some of the most interesting weapons in the series, starting with the chain of 1,000 miles. One of my personal favorites with this long, extensive chain. This chain actually ends up being endless. However, since this is a cursed weapon, by looking at the back end of the weapon, you can counter it by making it so that the chain is no longer endless. It has a weakness. When you look at the opposite end of this chain, it's no longer going to have endless length, making it so you get close enough to Toji to actually attack him. But however, if you do get close enough to Toji, he does have a shit ton of speed and physical strength to actually hurt you with. And of course, Toji using this weapon would know its weakness, and the way he counters its weakness is by making it so that you could never see the back end of the chain, making it endless the entire time. The weakness of the chain does not matter because the cursed spirit that he uses on missions ends up swallowing the back end of the chain. So you could never exploit the weapon's weakness at all. So practically, in the hands of Toji, this chain is endless and there's nothing you can really do about it. Maybe if you're stronger than him, which is very unlikely because not many people have heavenly restriction, nor would any average opponent have his resourcefulness and knowledge over his weapons. Unless, of course, he wanted to tell you. But even so, another good way to try and fight this back is to try and pull the chain out of the cursed spirit's mouth. But Toji's not going to let you do that because he's just going to tug it right away from you. So at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about it. And if Toji's feeling so inclined, he can actually attach other weapons to the end of this chain, making it so that he has multiple weapon combinations and options when it comes to defeating an opponent. So yes, this is honestly the perfect combo to fight people at a distance because we all know he has a gun and that gun is only going to go but so far. His next tool would be the inverted spear of heaven, and this one definitely has one of my favorite designs for the weapons so far in this series. What makes this weapon so special is the fact that it can completely nullify a curse technique that it comes into contact with, and this is one of the sole reasons why he was able to actually beat Satoru, because as we know, Satoru has an impenetrable force field around his body at all times, which is made up of space. But thanks to the inverted spear of heaven, Toji was actually able to finally damage him at the right time and the right place, oddly enough. And this would be because this weapon completely makes curse techniques useless, and this, combined alongside the strategy that Toji had employed, was honestly a recipe for disaster. For Gojo, that is. With a weapon like this, Toji can easily counter just about anyone he wants. This weapon, combined with the chain of 1,000 miles, Gojo was practically a sitting duck while he was floating in the air for Toji to hit him. You could only imagine how many times Toji would have caught someone off guard only to kill them with a weapon combination like this. If he really wanted to, I could imagine him using this combination by running outside of a domain expansion before it kills him, and by throwing his weapon inside of a domain only to fish out any sorcerer trying to cheat him with an expansion attack. After this, we have Playful Cloud. This would be one of Maki's personal favorite weapons. However, in the hands of Toji, he makes her look like utter garbage with this weapon. He is in a completely different league of his own, making this weapon into something that it really shouldn't be. Especially when you take into consideration that this was actually Toji's own weapon. So if you're wondering why he was using Playful Cloud a little too well with such expertise, now you know why. It's because he's very accustomed to using it. Upon using it, he would use the 3-section staff in an ungodly way, making it bend and move in a way that Maki could only dream of. And this same weapon is a weapon that does not have the powers of a curse technique behind it. With that being said, it solely depends on the power and strength of its user. And of course, Toji being as strong as he is, he'd be one of the very few people that could actually use this weapon at its fullest potential. Like I said before, he is a genius at combat, and he takes full advantage of his own strength and the weapons around him. He would rub the Playful Cloud weapon together only to sharpen it and turn it into a blade, allowing him to repeatedly stab and completely overwhelm anyone he's fighting with the sheer amount of pain that he inflicts on them from poking holes into their body. Finally, we have the weapon that Toji would be the most famous for using, the Split Soul Katana. This katana is honestly one of the most powerful cursed weapons that you could get your hands on, because no matter how durable you are, it wouldn't matter in the slightest what you could do against the Split Soul Katana, because this katana would cut through your very soul. There's no way of surviving an attack from this weapon, because the minute your soul is cut, your existence is cut too, making it a surefire weapon to work on anyone and anything, leaving this weapon to only complement Toji's strength and incredible perks at an insane degree. In order to use this weapon at its fullest potential, you would need eyes that could absorb the souls of inorganic matter. With that being said, Toji's eyes would be able to do this because he can use this weapon at its fullest potential. This would be thanks to the heavenly restriction that he has placed on his body, which, once again, took away all of his cursed energy. And not only that, it would sharpen all of his senses, leaving him to practically be a human being that has reached his peak. It's a bit ironic, maybe even a little bit poetic, the fact that he would lose everything, even his own cursed technique, to be able to have the power to be at the top of the Jujutsu world. Even though the Jujutsu world would revolve around curses and cursed techniques. However, going against that, he's able to be considered to be at that peak and rival people who do not have the same abilities as him. Toji's body would be so powerful that he would develop a resistance to curses. You could really only imagine what kind of advantages that can give him fighting beings in a cursed world. He would have different advantages compared to other Jujutsu sorcerers, because rather than relying on sensing someone's cursed energy, which is something that Gojo Satoru actually did while in his fight against Toji, instead, Toji could just smell the odor of his opponent or also recognize their footsteps due to his enhanced senses. Most people would undermine him and others would even idolize him. But one thing is clear, the conventional uses of curses and cursed techniques will not work on Toji, because like I said before, he can move in and out of domains. You cannot sense his cursed energy. So he's practically invisible, and finally a domain's guaranteed attack will not hit him. Yes, this is an attack that is supposed to hit no matter what, but it will not work on Toji. And this is all because Toji has no cursed energy. So one of the main things that sorcerers use in order to win a fight against any opponent cannot be used on Toji. And domains would be some of the strongest tools that any Jujutsu sorcerer could use in a fight. In a weird way, you could say Toji directly counters everyone in this manga. This without a doubt speaks to what kind of potential heavenly restriction could have on the world in Jujutsu Kaisen. If everyone in the world were to have heavenly restriction, then would Toji be as strong as he is against other sorcerers, or would other people with heavenly restriction simply beat him and outsmart him at his own game? This is another layer that heavenly restriction actually applies to the plot, because we have Maki, who also has heavenly restriction. However, she's not quite on Toji's level. But if we had more and more people with this same ability, could they really outclass him? That is one thing I really wonder when it comes to this series. Is Toji simply at the peak because of his combative genius and skill with a weapon, or is it simply because of the fact that the heavenly restriction allows him to bypass most curse techniques and abilities that everyone has in this manga? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Toji would end up selling his only child Megumi to the Zenin clan, and now reasons as to why he would do this are practically unknown, but I think we could come to the conclusion that he was doing this to not only give Megumi a better life, because he was already struggling to get enough money as it is, but he knew something about his son's potential that no one else did, especially when he names Megumi Blessings. There's something about Megumi that we need to know, considering the fact that even Sukuna would take an interest into Toji's son. Now, what kind of connection could Toji have with Sukuna? That is something that is very interesting to think about. This wouldn't only just branch off from Toji, this would lead over into the entire Zenin clan. This clan would actually have a huge interest in curse techniques as a whole. Megumi's curse technique must be something special in its very own right, especially since a clan that has the biggest involvement and interest in curse techniques ends up having such a prodigy in their midst. The fact that they would even buy Megumi from Toji says a lot about what Megumi is capable of and what kind of value he and his curse technique truly have. Speaking of curse techniques, after Toji's fight with Gojo, which led to Toji's defeat, there would be a curse technique that would actually end up resurrecting Toji from the grave. When using a seance shape-shifting technique, there's an ability to be able to use Toji Fushiguro's body information in order to fight. With that being said, if I were to summon Toji and use his information on my own body, I'd be able to have all of his abilities at my disposal. However, this would be under the assumption that he's a regular shaman whose power I'm drawing from. He has the heavenly restriction, so what this does is it makes it so that the heavenly restriction overwrites the soul. So because Toji's body has heavenly restriction, this allows him to overwrite a person's soul and end up stealing their body if they are summoning him through a seance shapeshifting technique. With this same shapeshifting technique, the user always uses the body's information, because if she were to pull another soul into another body, then both of the souls would be battling each other for that one specific body that they can control. However, she would draw from Toji's body itself and use it on somebody else's soul. Long story short, when using a seance shapeshifting technique, you better hope whoever is using Toji's information has a soul strong enough to be able to actually use Toji's body. If not, Toji could come back to life, just like in this example. And there's even more to it than just that, because upon using the same curse technique, it would normally be a limited time, would go back to normal with anyone using the body's information or their soul's information, leading it to be temporary, and so the person would inevitably get their original body and soul back. However, because Toji has no cursed energy, the energy will never run out, so if he were to be resurrected, he would be alive indefinitely unless he chooses to take his own life. With Toji's life on our minds, this leads us to wonder why exactly would he step down from the Zenin clan? We get a better understanding of this because he would say that the Zenin clan is useless for someone like him, but for Megumi, the Zenin clan would be the perfect place to hone his potential. And to be fair, this is kind of crazy coming from the guy who can run across water like it's nothing. So maybe you could think that Toji didn't have any type of self-worth before he ended up getting this heavenly restriction on his body. Maybe his own curse technique before the restriction was put on his body was actually something that he couldn't master, or it was a technique that no one else really deemed to be worthy of the zenin clan's trouble. After all, the zenin clan would specialize in having a prestigious interest in other curse techniques. And while having a curse technique that's not really up to par, or maybe even not having a curse technique at all, Toji would use this heavenly restriction and find a new identity for himself, because he would no longer belong in the zenin clan itself, cementing this by changing his last name to Fushiguro. It's pretty odd though, because even after not having enough pride in taking his own original last name, he would still be allowed to make and call certain shots when it comes to being in the zenin clan as a whole. The clan in of itself must have really respected Toji, or he must have earned their respect on his own terms, which is still allowing him to have so much power within the clan, even after he's dead and gone. Because even while being dead, he would still play a role in deciding who the leader of the clan will be. Without a doubt, he ended up earning the zenin clan's respect probably through his sheer strength and the fear that the clan would possess overseeing him with his heavenly restricted body. Even then, the 10 Shadows technique would be inherited by Megumi from Toji's bloodline, because this technique will be passed down through the family. Now, would Toji have used this technique? Would he actually have troubles using this technique? Or would he have not gotten this technique at all and something else entirely, which is why he really wouldn't have been accepted by the clan in the first place? This shouldn't come to any surprise, because Toji actually is a very layered character despite what little screen time he does have. As we know, Toji wouldn't really have the best relationship with his son Megumi by any means. But in a weird way, they do have a lot in common in their relationship. Although it may seem very hollow, it is actually really complicated, and it pushes the boundaries for Toji and Megumi moving forward in the story. Like I mentioned before, Toji does end up having an identity crisis, because he pushes away the zenin clan due to a lack of acceptance, leading him to go by the name of Fushiguro. And, of course, naturally, Megumi's last name would also be Fushiguro. Now, I know this is a simple and basic way of drawing a comparison between these two characters, but there is actually a lot of depth and value behind their last name. You see, their last name is their identity. Just like Toji, Megumi ends up rejecting himself as well. You and I are the same. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Please, you should bring that kind of stuff up with Maki. I no longer have any connection with the zenin family. How about it, zenin? How's a little star plasma vessel assassination sound to you? I don't go by zenin anymore. I got married and took my wife's name. I go by Fushiguro now. Hey, what's your name? Fushiguro. Not zenin, huh? Good for you. Megumi and Toji are the same because they both reject the fact that they are a part of the zenin clan. Both father and son suffer from a heavy case of self-denial and rejection. Ironically enough, even though Megumi doesn't know his father, he would still take in his father's same traits. Worst of all, both of them wouldn't even know each other. Oh, right. How's Megumi doing? Who's that again? Your dad. I killed. So what? I don't care where he is or what he's doing. I haven't seen him in years. I don't even remember what he looks like. But I get the gist of what you're talking about. Megumi and Toji both have a very weird relationship when it comes to being father and son, because they are going through the same exact experience as one another, not knowing each other and going through self-rejection. Megumi and his father Toji are the same, however, they are actually very different because, ironically enough, Megumi would be born with the talent and the ability to become one of the most powerful prospects in the zenin clan, while Toji would view himself as someone who does not have potential and someone that really doesn't belong in the zenin clan. The only difference between the two is the very fact that Toji does not have a technique while Megumi does, and there's one aspect about this that really says a lot about both of them. Toji would have nothing to work with and would detach himself from the pride of the zenin clan in order to reach the peak of the Jujutsu world, which was his inevitable goal. Megumi would actually have this talent, but he would come nowhere close to the peak. Both characters would deny the fact that they are part of the zenin clan. However, Toji would have a deep love and affection for the very fact that he is a zenin. He would want to discredit, he would want to crush the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world and the zenin family. He would hate these things because in the end, he would love them and be upset at how they pushed him away. Or more accurately, how he pushed himself away. On the other hand, Megumi would be completely accepted and people would also pay top dollar for his potential and the idea of a prospect such as him being among the clan. Megumi thinks he's not accepted, but he is the most accepted out of anyone in the clan. Toji was rejected, but he loves the clan. While Megumi was accepted, yet he doesn't care about the clan at all, and that is the biggest difference. Although I say all of this and I talk about their differences, they have the same driving point, which would be family. Toji would do everything in his power for the family that rejected him, the zenin clan, while Megumi would do everything in his power for the family that also rejected him, the Fushiguro family. With both Megumi and Toji feeling rejected, Toji would reject himself in order to feel accepted by the zenin clan, while Megumi would reject himself in order to feel accepted by the Fushiguros. Both father and son reject themselves so that they could earn the love and respect from the families that rejected them. However, this would be from different sides of their families. With both of their characters moving forward, we would realize that Toji would do everything for himself, for his own self-affirmation and self-worth, while Megumi would fight for others due to believing in his own self and his conscience. Toji's self-worth comes from being selfish, while Megumi's self-worth comes from being selfless. Regardless of being selfish or selfless, at the end of the day, the people around Toji and Megumi determined their self-worth. They would act according to the will of other people. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be the only ones to do this, nor would they be the only zenins to do this. Toji has some pretty crazy similarities with another character, with it being someone who isn't his son or any one of his children. This person would be another one of his relatives, on the more distant side of his family, Maki zenin. Toji and Maki would actually end up being the same, with both of their goals being a fight for acceptance amongst the zenin clan that rejected and abandoned them. We don't have solid answers about what Toji went through, but what we do know is both Toji and Maki were not able to live up to the potential of the zenin clan itself. Whether it be Maki not being born with a curse technique of her own, or Toji possibly experiencing the same exact thing, or maybe having a curse technique that wasn't all that good to begin with. But both characters end up using the heavenly restriction on their body, which ends up taking away any cursed energy that they could possess in favor of having superhuman strength. As we know, the zenin clan values curse techniques above anything else, so Maki and Toji would both go against the active ideals and teachings of the zenin clan in order to show what kind of strength and self-worth that they both have on their own 2 feet, with them practically spitting on everything that the zenin clan stands for and the Jujutsu world. As I said before, Toji would be going through self-rejection, and of course, Maki would go through the same exact thing and through the same way Toji is experiencing it. Because both Maki and Toji were rejected by the zenin clan, they both end up rejecting themselves in a form of acceptance from the clan that ultimately does not care about them. But they both do care about the clan, so they push through and make these efforts to prove their worth to this same clan that rejects them. Toji and Maki would both come to the conclusion that they would want to crush the zenin clan in their own specific way. But of course, if they are similar, they are going to have differences as well, with the main difference being that Toji is also a Fushiguro and he has a family that he can actually turn to. But Maki is a zenin through and through with no one else to turn to except for her twin. Unlike Toji, who threw his last name Zenin away and got a new identity as a Fushiguro, Maki would still end up carrying her last name, but whenever it is mentioned, she would have a feeling of hatred or embarrassment, because she's always reminded that she's a failure. Although Toji and Maki would walk similar paths, they would end up taking completely different directions in their approaches, one being a lot more infamous and another being a little bit more honorable. Toji would throw away any and every piece of pride that he would have left over the Zenin clan, and he would ultimately become a person who kills Jujutsu sorcerers due to his feeling of rejection. While in Maki's case, her feelings of rejection would only push her to actually become one of the best Jujutsu sorcerers. Toji's hatred for the Zenin clan ended up in him actually killing other sorcerers, but Maki's hatred for the Zenin clan pushed her to actually become a sorcerer and prove everyone wrong. Toji would push himself further away from the clan while Maki would try to get closer to it. Toji would throw away his pride and leave the clan in of itself, while Maki would not throw away her pride. She would cling on to it and try to become the head of the clan. That's the huge difference between them. Their rejection actually even stems deeper, because although the Zenin clan were the ones to reject Maki, she still looks for recognition from people that have nothing to do with the Zenin clan at all. When Yuta would admire her strength and resilience, and he would say that he would want to be just like Maki, Maki would take these compliments and reject them. She would feel as if she's not worthy of being complimented because she's been rejected so much in her life. So much so that even when people who aren't in the Zenin clan end up trying to accept her, she ends up rejecting those compliments and questions her self-worth. Toji would even be valued by other people in the Zenin clan, with them going as far as to admiring him. Like I said before, although he's in such a crazy predicament as it is, he still has a lot of power and connections throughout the clan. People outside of the Zenin clan would acknowledge and even respect Maki, while people inside of the Zenin clan would acknowledge Toji and respect him even though they rejected him. There's one thing that ultimately separates Toji and Maki, although Maki would try to be just like him and even wield his same weapons and fighting style. As I mentioned before, Toji would actually have a deep love for the Zenin clan within himself. Toji's love for the Zenin clan would be the reason why he would push himself away from it. Because the clan pushed him away, he would ultimately end up following their will. Maki, on the other hand, would take this as a challenge, and she would decide to go against the will of the Zenin clan by trying to cement herself as the head. Both Toji and Maki have very similar circumstances, but at the end of the day, they have very different values when it comes to the Zenin clan. When we see Maki ultimately imitate Toji and try to transform into him so that she could finally reach her goals, she comes to the conclusion that she's going to kill the entire clan out of hatred and revenge for her twin sister, which is understandable to say the least, but this actually says a lot about how much Maki truly values the Zenin clan. You see, when it comes to Maki and her sister Mai, twins in Jujutsu Kaisen end up counting as one individual. Maki is Mai and Mai is Maki, meaning that they are the same person. If Mai wants to destroy the Zenin clan, then Maki wants to do the same. They both share the same wish because they are the same person. When Mai wishes to destroy everything, Maki will actually have that same wish. And so Maki would live to destroy the Zenin clan. Maki would not value the Zenin clan, but Toji would. When Maki's father sees Maki emerge from the shadows, he begins to remember the fear that he felt in his body from fighting Toji. This is because Toji would, just like Maki, end up being in a position that would lead to him wanting to kill the clan. Toji, just like Maki, would end up trying to kill the Zenin clan, but Toji would be completely different from Maki, because the current Zenin clan would exist because of Toji's whim, meaning that unlike Maki, in the end, he would choose to spare the Zenin clan and not kill them. Like I said, they have different values when it comes to the clan. The clan rejected Toji and he still loves them, but the clan would reject Maki and she would end up hating them. Maki would kill everyone in the Zenin clan due to her hatred, but Toji would choose despair and let the current zenin clan exist because he loves the clan itself. No matter what, Toji always wanted what was best for the zenin clan and his family, while Maki would care more about herself than the clan and her own family. Toji and Maki would go through the same circumstances of rejection and have the same kind of powers, but in the end, they are nothing alike because their values are significantly different. Maki did what Toji would never do, and that would be to kill his own family, no matter how much they rejected him or even hated him. Toji would still retain his pride and love, while Maki would throw it all away in an instant. Not many individuals can even understand Toji at all. With only one person actually knowing how Toji felt, that person would be Gojo Satoru. Toji would be rejected from his family, and he would go against everything that the Jujutsu world stands for by sacrificing all of his abilities and his potential and his talents so that he could use the power of the heavenly restriction. Leaving Toji with no cursed energy, he would be the exact opposite of what the Jujutsu world stands for. However, Satoru would be born with the limitless and the six eyes technique, making Gojo out to be the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world and everything that Jujutsu stands for. Gojo would be highly respected amongst shamans everywhere. Simply due to the way that he was born, he was able to change the world. Toji would be born with a curse. However, Gojo would be born with a blessing, and this would make their fight all the more impactful because Toji and Gojo would be polar opposites in every sense of the word. You would have Toji, someone who's completely rejected and hated by the Jujutsu world, going up against Gojo, the only person completely loved and blessed by the Jujutsu world at large. By winning this fight, Toji would prove that he's more valuable than Jujutsu ever could be, and that he doesn't need any acceptance from the zenin clan or the Jujutsu world at all. But of course, that wasn't the reality of everything that happened. Gojo would defeat Toji, leaving Gojo to be the strongest sorcerer in the modern age, making him untouchable. Yet the only person that got close enough to killing him was Toji. Gojo would then wear Toji's clothes in his battle against Sukuna out of respect and because of the values that Toji's fight versus Gojo really had. Gojo would have been the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world in his fight against Toji. However, when Gojo is fighting Sukuna, Sukuna would be the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world. These fights would be similar because just like how Toji wanted to fight Gojo, Gojo would want to fight Sukuna the same exact way. And why would they both do this? Because of self-affirmation. Toji wanted to understand his true self and his own values, and he wanted to make sure that he was correct in doing what he was doing. Toji wanted to prove to himself that he didn't need the Jujutsu world in his life at all, that he could be the strongest without it. Gojo would fight Sukuna in order to affirm his identity, to ensure that he is the strongest sorcerer alive. Without strength, Gojo and Toji would be nothing, and this is why these fights mean so much to these characters, and this is why Gojo is wearing Toji's clothes, because he knows exactly why Toji was fighting him. And he's fighting Sukuna for the same way, and he's wearing these clothes to honor that idea and that memory. Let's just hope that Satoru doesn't end up making the same mistake as Toji. With these final words, I hope you can actually understand just how much Toji means to Jujutsu Kaisen and all of the characters that belong in it. Toji is a really complex character who has a lot more in common with Megumi, Maki, and Gojo alike, making you appreciate his character to a different degree. He would love the Jujutsu world so much that he would pull himself away from it, and he would make the same mistakes as Megumi, Maki, and Gojo. He would push himself away from his clan like Megumi and Maki, but he would avoid killing his clan entirely because he would still appreciate them, unlike Maki. He would battle for his identity only to further validate himself, just like Gojo would. Even when making these same mistakes, in the end, Toji still completely understood himself, and I feel like that's what he wanted most of all, leaving him to only think of his family once again in his final moments.